Rugby is a game of passion, speed and power. Playing rugby is a great experience and a great talking point with people, and yet when asked what you do, when you answer, all you get is a glazed look of confusion. Unlike football, in which somebody naturally understands the meaning of attacker, midfielder and defender, if you say to someone you play prop or lock or outside centre, all you're doing is telling them a random selection of letters. So what I plan to do is help explain each and every position you can play across the pitch in rugby union, from the battlefield of the front row all the way to the speed machines of the wing. You will learn what it takes to play each and every position, for things like training in diets to injury prevention and tricks of the trade.
And this sorts the men from the boys. Pause, engage!
Away they go again. Massive struggle. Picked up now by Morgan. He rolls, tries to get it down, but it is a penalty try, says Nigel Owens. England have their try, the forwards have their reward.
Well, that's what they were going for. They didn't want a three-pointer or even an attempt at. They wanted.
A squad of rugby players comprises of 15 players, 8 forwards and 7 backs. The 2 wingers occupy the number 11 and 14 shirts and are part of the backs, and are placed as their name indicates on the wings of the pitch, with 11 normally on the left hand side and 14 the right.
I think for the winger job, I think it's quite several jobs you could argue as the main ones. In some ways people think of you as the strike force, you actually score the tries. In defence, you're also potentially catching kicks, especially when you're on the blindside wing. And your role with combining with the full back is very pivotal in that context about defence. And also, when they're running at you and attacking, it's also you're sort of like potentially the last line of defence, depending on how you and the full back defend wide outside.
As a winger, primarily to score tries, but also to give as much attacking impetus to the team as possible.
My job is to score tries. Obviously, you know, a lot of people are more familiar with football, so a winger is sort of similar to a striker in football. You're there to finish off and score the tries, but you know the game's evolved a lot even over the last sort of 10 years, and you know your role's a lot more than just scoring tries. You know, defensively is a big part of the game. Fielding kicks, chasing kicks, you know, communication with the other back three to fill the space, so there's no sort of holes for opposition just to get any sort of easy field position and stuff like that. So
running, positionally, obviously attacking, being everywhere. You know, obviously the modern game winger obviously appears in places he shouldn't appear. You know, obviously finishing tries, chasing high balls, chasing kicks, sort of last line of defence sometimes as well, and just being everywhere really.
So the main job of the winger is to score tries and to make sure the points on the board keep increasing. But how much communication is there in the back three to make sure this keeps happening effectively?
There's always something going on. Do you know what I mean? From our point of view, there's always positions where you have to change. You know, if I'm caught out in a tackle, someone has to take my place and get back into the fullback position. It's that communication that's always going on. You know, from my point of view, I like a noisy house just because I know what's going on there and I know where everyone is. You know, the more chat's coming in, the easier it is to do my job then.
We try to communicate as much as we can, just because we're so far apart from each other. We try to cover a lot of the field between three players in the back. You know, you sort of like, it's that you try and yell and try and get your point across, tell him that you're there, but a lot of it is eye contact and making sure that he's there.
Loads, has to be. Some of it, if you play together on a regular basis, there's not as much because you can read each other's body language, and there's sort of they're not processes, they're rules, they're sort of accepted ways of helping out. We always talk about having a rubber band between the winger, the full-back and the winger, so as soon as one moves, the other one moves around, so you're constantly like that arc of rubber bands pulling each other around. But when the high ball goes up, whoever's getting the ball, you want the other one trying to be there and support, so you don't get smacked over and knocked over, that somebody's in there straight away. And also, if they want to counter-attack, that they're available. So communication is you know, crucial.
Not so much between me and, if I'm on the wing, it's difficult to speak to the opposite winger, but there's a lot between talking to your 13 and then talking to your fullback, and like I say, you continually sort of, the whole sort of pendulum that you hear people talk about, and ultimately as a 3 you're trying to cut down, like I said, sort of field position, sort of kicking options for the opposition, but at the same time you don't want to sit 3 men back all the time, because then they'll just attack you with the ball in hand. So it's sort of, there's a lot of unnoticed work, if you know what I mean. You know, we get the glory from getting the ball over the try line, but at the same time there's a lot of work that you do that you don't necessarily get patted on the back for, but if you weren't to do it, the team would be exposed, really.
Not really, no. I mean, it depends on, you might have a preference of what foot you step off or what hand you like to carry the ball in. I think when I first started here, you know, there was a balance between myself and Salosi where I think I actually played my first game on the left and then ended up moving over to the right just as he came in, and we just settled there. And
do you have a preference of 11 or 14?
I think I prefer 14, but just more because that's where I've always played. You know, I have gone on over to the left as well, and I wouldn't say there's massive difference, but like I say, guys do prefer to step off one foot, have the ball in one hand, so I think that's probably the biggest thing.
I don't have a huge preference, but I've played 90% of my rugby on the right wing, and it's totally down to my first opportunity was on the right wing, so that's why I ended up playing there, and things went well, so I was a right winger. But on paper I'm probably a left winger because I'm left-footed. I step off my left foot predominantly, so I'm always going to step in field as opposed to being on the right and stepping off the field, as it were. So whatever foot you are predominantly would make the decision. Just from a fielding kicks and kicking the ball and stuff, you know, if you're running down the right hand side of the field on an arc, it's easier to kick off your right foot than it is off your left, equally on the other side. So on paper I'm probably a left winger.
All depends really. For myself, playing on I mainly play on the left wing, just because I'm right-handed. I like to make an outside break, and I feel like breaking out to my left side is the stronger, my strongest side. So and obviously being right-handed, it's my strongest arm to push off defenders. So for me, that's how I feel about playing on the left-hand side. The right-hand side is, you know, a lot of people probably the opposite to me. They're stronger to go out to the right-hand side. But if I was to play right, I'd like to use my step more, which is a right foot step.
Ideally, you need to have obviously great feet, ability to have pace, or some people use size to physically beat the opposition. There's no doubt that wingers that can score lots of tries and have that ability to sniff out those tries, they tend to be a much more sought after. But you've got to be able to tackle, you've got to be able to catch a high ball, and ideally kick, if nothing else, just to kick off the pitch decent, if not be as good as a fly half.
Obviously, to be fast, you know, but if you're not fast, it's just to have that killer instinct to recognise space and to make the most of space. You know, there's a lot of wingers now that are a bit, probably not as quick, but very strong, and they hold their balance well and very agile. So I think the main thing is to have a bit of speed, but also to still be strong and to be agile.
You need to be pretty versatile, whatever position you play. You know, there's guys. You know, I've played wing, I've played fullback, I've played centre. Probably only your halfbacks are out and out 9s and 10s, but then, you know, we've got 10s here that also play 15. So generally you have to be versatile, but then at the same time you don't want to be too versatile, because then you're almost like a jack of all and master of none type of thing. So the versatility helps. You know, if for argument's sake your 9 or your 10 are stuck at the bottom of a ruck, you can't wait for them to get out to play the ball. You need someone to step in to move the ball from the ruck. You might need to step in at 10. As a winger, you sometimes find quite often that you end up slotting in at first, second receiver when those guys are tied up in the previous ruck.
Well, a lot of it's to do with your physiology and whether you're blessed with the genes that give you a bit of pace. There's a lot of debate around the game nowadays about there's lots of big guys and fast guys. There are not a lot of big and fast guys. There's one or two. Obviously, people talk about your John Lomus and they talk about your George Norths. But again, there are quite a lot of big players around that play on the wing, but there's not that many that make it a long time. And even if you think about John Lomu, unfortunately, because of an illness, he didn't play for that long. And George North is still very early in his career at the moment. So you can either have somebody who's very big, who may not be the quickest, but you use his bulk in a way that you can adapt to the game, or use your pace where you give the ball to him and people are going to be dead scared of trying to defend him.
It's both. I think you can't have the pace without the strength to use it in certain situations, because defences will dictate. They'll know that if you're the quickest, not to give you any room, and conversely, if you can't obviously make a bust in midfield and finish it off, then you need that side of the game as well. So it's definitely, you need that balance between both.
Yeah, I guess it's 6 done as others and others, isn't it, really? Obviously, you need your out and out pace, obviously, when you get the chance to run it. But at the same time, when the game's change, you need to pop up inside, and offer a bit more power running. We need to bang it up a bit.
I think it's good to have a good mixture, to have a balance, to know how to still be fast, but to also have that strength to break through tackles, because there's really, in the modern game, there's really chances that you have open field to just to run. There's always going to be defenders in front of you, and you'll always have to either go through or around them. So it's always to have a good balance.
I suppose a lot of it's natural, really. You normally find the kids that are quick end up in the backs, and the kids that aren't so quick end up in the forwards, and then naturally the way you play the game, you get quite a lot of speed training out of the position that you play in. So like I was saying before, not so much carrying the ball, but there's a lot of work that you do that needs a speed element, whether it's chasing box kicks or covering the backfield. A lot of the work we do is explosive, so that in itself is keeping your speed, as opposed to a prop or a front five is a lot more sort of brute strength with plodding around, if you know what I mean. So, but on top of that, you try to do power stuff in the gym and speed stuff, speed training and bits and bobs like that. I'd probably rather play against someone bigger than me than someone smaller than me, because you know what they're going to do. You know that they're not going to run round you. You know that they're not going to put footwork on you, so they're just going to come straight at you. So from that point of view, from a defensive element, it's pretty up and down. As long as you can tackle, and you're not expected to smash guys like that backwards because of the difference in size and weight. Whereas you come across a Shane Williams or a Jason Robinson, guys like this, they can make you look silly. So I always found it easier playing against bigger wingers than smaller wingers, to be honest.
Well, in some ways you know that they're not going to be able to run around you, and in some ways you want them to. So you try and show them the outside, so they try and go for the outside. They tend to be physically bigger and stronger, so they potentially have a much longer handoff. So if you're going for the tackles, you've got to be very aware of where their arms are and when they're the handoff, so you can try and dip underneath the handoff so you don't get brushed off. But if they are going to be physical, well, fine. It's in some ways that's easier to tackle because the guy's just going to come straight at you. So you can't miss him, he's just going to make sure you hang on to him.
So on a typical week, we'll train, say for a Saturday game, we'll train Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday and Friday. So Tuesday and Wednesdays will be weights in the morning, rugby in the afternoon. That'll all be our preparation and analysis of the week coming up. So then that'll be off day, and then the final training day again, it'll be gym, rugby specific in the afternoon, but that'll be more attack based, putting the finishing touches on everything going into the game. The last training day that Friday will just be real light. It's literally just last minute fine tuning, just making sure everything's as clear as it can be, and then you're ready for the game on the Saturday.
At the moment, because obviously in the European stage we just come out of, it's been quite a bit of a lighter weight, lighter sort of week. It's been more sort of based towards power, you know, and being fresher for the games, obviously because they're a step up again. So it's just been a case of, you know, lowering the volume a little bit, changing the weight schedule to a bit more power based, and then just taking the volume down.
You know, in the season now, everybody pretty much does the same schedule in terms of, you know, Monday, Tuesday there's weights and rugby. There's normally a unit session in there, so obviously the forwards will be scrummaging and doing the line out, so as the backs will be doing you know, strike plays. So, you know, we're doing maybe more aerobic in that element of training, but then we're still doing team training all together. So it just, like I say, you know, in a field session, if we're doing attack, you know, say for a basic line out attack, forward are doing the line out, I'm on the wing, I'm probably doing a 40-metre shuttle every line out attack, whereas the forwards will just be doing the line out and then getting around the corner. So just naturally in what you're doing and the position you're in, the training does vary, but it's not, you know, everybody's just doing their role, if you know what I mean.
For wingers, like you said, there's a lot of, there has to be a good balance between speed and power. So we do a lot of short bursts. We don't really do too much endurance. A lot of the endurance is done through pre-season, and then we try and top up on our speed and agility and power throughout the season. You know, so we pretty much train as a backline together, but then we sort of top up on our conditioning days with a bit of extra speed and agility.
I mean, I come from the day when we were still amateur days, so we trained on, you know, during the midweek we did a few sprints and various things, but a lot of the time was just doing rugby type stuff. The rest of the time you're trying to pick and choose, you know, times to try and train. While I was in the Air Force, it was very difficult. So I either try to go and do a few sprints out in the car park, or just go for a jog or a run. And, you know, it wasn't very scientific in those days.
Yeah, obviously, you know, everyone has to watch what they're eating and watch what they're drinking. You know, you can't just eat takeaways and get drunk every night. You know, that side of the game's moved on massively, and you wouldn't be able to keep up if you lived that lifestyle. You know, the guys that are doing that get found out pretty quickly. So a lot of it's sort of personal responsibility. We do get monitored here. Obviously, we eat here every day, so you know, you don't get really a choice. You get choices of, yeah, there's 2 or 3 options, but it's not like you can order a curry. So half your diet is controlled here, but then the other half when you're at home, I'd say the boys are pretty good. You know, don't get me wrong, I don't mind a takeaway once a week, normally at the weekend, and a couple of beers, but if you want to keep playing at this level, you just can't afford to do it.
You know, we do have our guidelines of what to eat and what not to eat, and what to drink and what not to drink, and when we should be eating, and you know, carb loading and stuff like that. So I think there's like pretty much generally the bigger lads and sort of the more leaner lads have different diets, but mainly we all sort of do the same thing.
We have to have a healthy, balanced diet. I mean, you know, we'll be told to stay away from fast foods and, you know, sweets, chocolates, those sort of things. But I guess there's a myth that you shouldn't eat carbs and all that. But I think we're lucky we have a chef here who gives us 2 meals a day in between training, which helps. But it's all in moderation. So depending what your body shape is, you eat the amount of calories that you need to sustain energy. Because if you're not eating enough, then you're going to be tired and you're not going to be able to train well.
I won't know off the top of my head. You know, you're talking on the 3 or 4, probably about 4 big meals and a couple of snacks, maybe.
I think my average is about, well, it's meant to be, I think 3,200, 3,500 roughly. In fact, I struggle to hit it sometimes because, I mean, you know, it's one of those, you eat till you feel comfortable, but you know, we're quite scientific with it now, and you know, we've worked out what a player can eat on a training day to make sure they've got the optimum energy levels. But
how many portions does that break down into? Is there a set amount?
I'd say 1, 2, 3, probably about 4 at least. I mean, you're meant to eat 4 to 5. That's what we're told. But I mean, say like myself now, I'll have a bowl of porridge in the morning. I'll have my 2 meals here, so 1 after weights, 1 after dinner, training, and then I'll have dinner in the evening, and that'll be me. So.
I'm a bit of a freak in that I've never had a huge appetite, so that's when the supplements come in. So, you know, you could argue that, you know, you need, if the average is 2,500 to 3,000 calories a day, you could argue you need double that. But it's so difficult to physically eat that. You know, so that's where the protein and everything comes in post-training, and that's all provided here as well. So, you know, the minute you come out of the gym, there's a fridge there on the side, straight to the fridge, take your protein shake, and then your meals are upstairs. You know, it's all controlled pretty well.
I'm not even sure, mate. That's a very good question. I think I try and eat, you know, the main three main meals of the day. You know, breakfast is a big part of it. Everyone, you know, you learn that from a young age. We try and top up with our snacks. Our snacks are quite, because we're training so much, we try and, you know, get the carbs in after trainings and when we're doing heavy loads. So snacks are very important as well.
Especially here in Northampton, where we've got a great program, you know, around individual development. So, you know, a lot of boys, you know, have, you know, sore shoulders after games, sore knees. So obviously we do a lot of prehab and activation around the knees and the shoulders, to keep them safe, really. Yeah,
there's, you know, I've been struggling a little bit with my hamstrings recently. There's a good exercise that I do, just leg extensions, but having, you know, chin to chest, which helps activate the neural system, and sometimes, you know, it helps with those hammy injuries and just making sure that they're all switched on, especially being a sprinter, and you need all those, you know, your hammies, your glutes all firing to not get injured.
Obviously, I am getting on a bit now, so I've had my sort of fair share of injuries, nothing major, touch wood, but everybody's got a sort of rehab program specific to them. So whether it's shoulders, knees, back, ankles, whatever it is, and you tend to find that it might only be a 10 or 15 minute program each day, but everybody tries to get that program in to, you know, prevent certain niggles or injuries coming back.
Massive. I mean, if you don't warm up, you're not ready to go. You know, you got a massive chance to pull a muscle or even do an injury.
A big part of it, you know, that's, I think warm-ups are the main thing. You know, you sort of build up to a peak and managing that and trying to measure that as well as you can, so that by the time you start the game, you're flying. You know, cool downs are different throughout different teams. With us, it's sort of like we do a lot of just a recovery protocol. We have our ice baths and stuff like that going on. You know, wearing our compression shorts, and we pretty much warm down again on it's called the recovery day, on the day after our match, which is, you know, a small jog, a swim, and another ice bath, which isn't very fun.
It's more when you get older. You know, it's one of those things that everybody seems to. It's not too bad once a day, but if you're doing a double field session, it's that second. So going out after lunch, when you've already been out, you've already warmed up, you've already done an hour, you've already cooled down, you've had your lunch, then to try and go out and do it again is quite tough. I'd say it doesn't really bother you till you get to about 30. You just sort of crack on, but you get over 30 and it's hard work. So, but it is important. You know, you see some of the young lads just go out and they're flat out straight away, but you know, me and a few of the older boys need a good 5-10 minutes just to get moving.
So what is the best advice for a winger? Well, in the words of former Wales and British and Irish Lions winger Ewan Evans, run Forrest run. But who is the best winger in the world, and why? What makes that person stand out so much above the rest?
I've been quite lucky to play against a few of some of the best wingers in the world. You know, obviously I got a lot of respect for Brian Urbana. You know, someone, as you said, has got pace and power, and he's someone who's just performed, you know, every international, every game he seems to be on his best, which is great to see.
Best winger in the world at the moment. At the moment, I'd probably say, I don't know, it's a very hard question. I mean, okay, I'll say the person who I think is playing the best at the moment is Brian Habana. I just think, you know, I mean, he's been doing it for a long time now, and, you know, maybe say 2 years ago, people were like, oh, he's off form, he's not, but, you know, he's come back, written everybody wrong, and, you know, he's probably playing as well as he was before, and, you know, he's not just all out pace now. So you look at his work rate, he comes off his wing looking for work, he plays left and right as well, and, you know, his strike record is unbelievable, so he's definitely at the top of his game at the moment.
The best winger in the world? Mate, I think it'd be difficult to pick one guy out. Obviously over my career, guys like Shane Williams, you know, at one end of the scale being so small but so robust and getting so many caps and tries at international level, you know, compared to somebody like I don't know, like a Joe Rokocoko or someone like that, you know, the New Zealand winger that was the other end of the spectrum, you know, big and heavy but still quick and, you know, an unbelievable winger. So, you know, I'd struggle I'd have to give you about 4 or 5 guys. I think Brian Habana, again, you know, Jason Robinson, more of a fullback, but, you know, there's just some unbelievable, you know, players out there.
Back, I think for me, Rupini Tata was someone that I always looked up to. Someone that was, you know, you couldn't explain how he got so good. But currently, watching the Autumn International, especially after that England game, Julian Savea, he's you know, he's a big lad, strong, he's fast, he's got, you know, all the attributes you need to be a top quality winger, and he shows that every week. He scored 2 tries on the weekend, and you know, I think he's only going to get better. He's still only very young.
Well, that's a hard question because some of the wingers that are around at the moment are just starting out. You know, George North potentially could have a massive impact, but so could Israel Folau, who is a phenomenal athlete, absolutely phenomenal athlete. His inexperience in, you know, he's played international at Rugby League, Aussie rules, and now at Australia in 3 different sports within 3 years. It's incredible. And so, you know, there's still early days with some of those wingers. You've got some of the older ones. I'm trying to think they're the older ones now. There's been so many changes in the last 2 or 3 years. There's nobody stands out. So those young ones are the ones that are making the headlines and they're potentially going to stand out. And it goes back to the sense that for you, George North, Israel Folau, you've got big guys who are very skillful with the ball and have got a bit of pace. And those two have got, you know, a fair amount of pace. So it's people getting used to that, and, you know, after a while they'll get used to it. And it's the challenge is always for players to be able to adapt their game, because they can't just stand still. They've got to keep learning and adapting the game to be able to keep improving.
There you go, the wingers, the speedy bullets of the rugby world. Keep looking out for more episodes of Scrummage to learn how to play all the positions of rugby union.